pretty wide-held conventional wisdoms. I mean, among them, and for me, one of the most shocking was the fact that you were found through your research that mothers who suffered depression were 4 times more likely to have children who experienced sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, and that in fact the incidence of SIDS is higher than in America than anywhere else. What is the linkage you're trying to develop here?
Well, SIDS has been a mystery for a long time, and of course usually parents put the child to bed and then the child dies with no apparent cause. And one of the really cutting-edge lines of thought that's evolving about sudden infant death is that in light of what we're talking about, say, people establishing these vital regulatory ties, it's especially vital between parents and infants who are fragile, actually, and probably have the most vulnerable bodies and minds and brains imaginable. And that what sudden infant death may represent is a failure of that regulatory process, that the infant is not getting enough regulation from a parent, and its own cardiorespiratory brain rhythms can't be sustained on its own, and they collapse and the infant dies. And there's some fascinating research done by James McKenna, a sleep scientist at Notre Dame, who studied infants and children, infants and mothers sleeping together, and he was the first person actually to study this. And he found that their sleep rhythms are intertwined during the night, that they're each regulating each other's sleep level. And the hypothesis is that if you take infants out of that communal context of sleep, you may be depriving them of a vital physiologic influence they need to stay alive during the night.
Well, and that in fact the higher incidence of SIDS may reflect the cultural bias against parents sleeping with children.
It may, because one of the puzzles of SIDS is that its incidence varies so widely in the world. The United States has the highest rate in the world, 2 per 1,000 live births. Some countries have rates that are 10 or 100 times lower. And so the question is, what is that cultural factor in this country that is putting our children at risk? And one of the ideas that we're raising in the book is it could well be that our culture discourages close contact between infant and parent, particularly at night.
Now, this also has fairly widespread implications. If how a child is loved during childhood, and especially the proximity between the child and the parent, the mother in this particular instance, it directly affects both their health and how they love in the future. Are we to conclude, therefore, stay-at-home parenting is better for a child, better for society, than 2 parents working?
There's no question, actually, that stay-at-home parenting is better for children. Now, the real question is how much better? Is it so much better that parents should do that, or is it so much better that we should make a big effort to revamp our society? And the evidence is mounting that because the parent and child have this regulatory relationship along this brain pathway, the parent is actually regulating the development of a child's growing brain, because the child's brain is growing by tremendous leaps and bounds, especially in the first couple years of life. And that during this vital period of brain growth, normal development of the brain depends on that special biological connection with the parent's brain. If we interfere with that and don't allow children enough exposure, we could be depriving them of something which helps make their brain turn out the healthiest.
Can daycare be a surrogate for parental love in that respect, you think?
Probably not, actually. Most daycare, as it's conducted, is of the impersonal variety. The children are cared for by a rotating series of impersonal caretakers, that there's a lot of staff turnover, there's very little personal interaction between the infants or the children and the staff. And these are really conditions that are hostile to the biological needs for connectedness that children have. So institutional kinds of daycare, because of the element of impersonality that they necessarily inject into a child's life, are hostile to those needs. Now, and again, the real question is, how hostile are they? How many hours of impersonal daycare can a child sustain before the mind is at risk?
Right. Now, some of this directly challenges early childhood development theory. I mean, part supports to the extent that there's no question that relations between parents and child, have a major part in forming the brain in that crucial 0 to 3, 0 to 5. But this also suggests, unlike early childhood development theory that says everything's finished, you're fully formed, that this isn't the case at all, that our evolution as human beings, the state of our brain is ever changing and evolving and conditioned based on who we love.
Exactly. And you know, the more we learn about the brain, the more we learn about how changeable it actually is. So there's more and more reason to think that it's changeable. Just in the past year, we used to think that the number of cells in the brain was fixed and you couldn't get any new ones. Now we know that the brain adds thousands of new cells every day. So it's clear that the brain does change on an ongoing basis, and that our relationships are a vital part of what makes it change, and makes it change in certain directions. And that occurs across the lifespan right up until the day we die.
Now, if we're hardwired